So now we talk about walrus. How many do you think are out there right now?
Gosh.
Well, how many was out there when you left?
There was about 250 on Main Beach. I counted 70 on First Beach.
Yeah.
And
Was
0
that-
on Campground and Buckbow Cove and Flat Rock. Oh no, we had 6 on Flat Rock.
Was that on a declining
That was
trend, or was it
It was,
coming up?
it was more than it was coming up. Slightly.
Oh.
You had already been out feeding.
And then Paul said he had seen a bunch feeding around Coolicock Bay. Said it was pretty good climbing there. And Paul had been climbing himself a few days ago. I was looking forward to going out in October.
Yeah,
That'd be kinda neat.
that would have been good. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
So when do we start?
Waiting for the word.
Waiting for the word. Okay.
This is the time when you just want to read from the Buffet book.
Introduce it a little bit. Oh yeah, we don't have that now.
Yeah.
No, we forgot it. I just. Is it on the computer now? Of course, if you're clicking between things, it might suck up power.
Should be another good board tide tonight. I'm excited.
Going back out.
Oh yeah.
How long does that last? About a week?
It's 2 a day all summer. It at the neap tide it gets a little low, and the channels shift like periodically in turning an arm. Where sometimes the side near Hope is better than the side near Girdwood. But right now that side's really good. But some kids just do it like they go twice a day every day. And like last winter they were okay. Some guys did it around Christmas because there was not much ice.
All right, it looks like we're live here. So welcome to our season wrap-up live chat for Round Island, the Walrus camera on explore.org. I'm Ben Histand, and with me is Ryan Morrill and our supervisor Ed Weiss. And yeah, we're here at our office in Anchorage, and we're looking forward to taking more of your questions with video this time, so that's exciting. Yeah, and I guess we'll jump into them here.
Alright, I'll read this one. I've learned a lot about walrus this summer, but I confess I'm not well informed on the research you have been doing.
And maybe we have audio troubles here. See if that fixes it. Okay.
Okay, in terms of research, we are basically doing enumeration, but we're doing biomass estimation. We're trying to estimate the number of animals on the island when we're there, including walrus, sea lions, and we do seabird phrenology. We are collecting scat for some biologists, walrus scat. And then, but in terms of biological research, occasionally we have scientists come out, like there's done studies on ravens and the foxes, and we've had archaeologists out there. But we're actually not doing much research.
It's largely a lot of monitoring, daily monitoring type stuff in terms of haul out censuses, seabird nesting, and any other little thing we can gather. We collect data on disturbances, visitor use, walrus, sea lions, just daily wildlife observations, weather conditions.
Our top priority is minimizing disturbances and making people aware of the sanctuary boundaries, and whether that be boats or planes or.
Right. And then there's more Pacific walrus research going on right now up north, and that's being carried out by other agencies like USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service. And we've had links on the discussion board to some of their papers and research, and we can repost those after this chat if anybody wants to look into that stuff. So.
Yeah, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a great tracking program, and I'm not. We can post that website, and you can follow their movements throughout the Chukchi and the Bering Sea.
Yeah, they're neat maps for sure.
I guess number 2, the question: is it considered hazardous duty, or a bonus for a job well done? It is not considered hazardous duty, or CPA. And our duty station is Anchorage.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a pretty isolated field setting for fish and game jobs. It's a 2-person camp. It takes usually 24 plus hours of travel to get there from Anchorage. Not much, rescue opportunity if something did happen. So there's definitely need to be careful and minimize accidents and all that. And I'd say in terms of field work in Alaska, it's a fairly sought after job to be working out there. It's such an amazing place to work in. So for people who are into that sort of thing, it's pretty desirable, I think.
It's fairly low turnover, would you say?
Yeah, we try to keep you guys happy and keep you working there. It's definitely hazards of working out there because it is a remote site, but it's definitely a sought after or a really good job.
Yeah. Question number 3. Do you see about the same number of walrus from year to year, or has there been a reduction in recent years due to factors like climate changes, etc.?
Excellent question.
Yeah. Well, since we're counting the walruses every day, every summer, year after year, we have a really good sense of trends over time. And it is true that there's been a decline in the average number of walrus that have been hauling out on Round Island over the years, like over a span of decades. That's been true. But it's hard then to go and say what the cause of that trend is. It could be related to climate change, but there are other factors involved too. What I would say.
Yeah, where there's multiple haulouts in the Bristol Bay area, north of Round Island, Cape Newenham and Cape Pierce, and then south by Cape Senehaven. And I guess it wasn't a thought that at one time Round Island was the single terrestrial haulout, and now there's some evidence that they're spreading out throughout Bristol Bay.
Well, historically, I mean, they've used, if you look over the last couple hundred years, anyway, or longer, they've used all of those sites. At one point in the 50s, when it became a sanctuary, it was down to pretty much just using, that was the only site that was being used. And now they've gone through a population increase in the 70s there, and we believe they're on a decline now. But the population studies that the service does, which is, pretty much the whole Bering Chukchi Sea region, including, you got to do work, the ones that are over in Russia as well as in Alaska. So it's very difficult to get a handle on what the population's doing, but they believe they're in a decline at this time. Regionally, within the Bristol Bay area, it's a little more difficult to get a handle on what's going on there because all of the haul outs are not being monitored consistently at any one time. You know, within the last year or two, we've probably got better information on more of the haul-outs than what we've had in a number of years. So there is some shuffling around between haul-outs in the region, but in general, yeah, we've definitely seen a decline at Round Island.
Yeah.
I guess what's the most difficult aspect for you guys spending the summer with the Walrus? I would say being away from our respective girlfriends and not being able to swim or fish. And
Yeah, the swimming, I guess, well, both swimming and fishing because it's a sanctuary, and swimming also because the water's pretty cold. But yeah. Yeah, it's pretty isolated. Kind of a long hitch in a field camp, but we do get nasty weather, but we get some really nice weather too. Yeah, fortunately with the internet connection and that we got for the webcam, we were able to be in touch a bit more this summer, so that kind of helps with staying in touch anyway. Number 5, what is the guess when the boys will ditch the island and head back to their other lives with wife and kids? Well, they're usually on the island into the month of October, I would say, and then head out maybe in mid-October or
Well, it varies from year to year. The biggest numbers of them historically, like right now at the end of August, beginning of September, the numbers usually take a big dive. They move off, start moving north and that along the coast, and then but we will have. Generally, we have walrus out there visiting clean into October and have had them there as late as the beginning of November, depending on the year. But they're usually much smaller groups.
And where will the walrus go from Round Island, and how do they survive the winter months? Well, they're very well adapted for their environments. They have the thick blubber to keep them warm, and they will go meet the women and the children, I guess, on the ice pack when the ice pack comes back south. We have that great map of all the different haulouts based on the Alaska side and the Russian side, and
yeah, maybe we can post that too.
yeah. But they like this. Yeah, they can swim almost anywhere, and
yeah, and when there is good sea ice available for them to haul out on, then that works well for them because they can rest on that surface. And sometimes the sea ice is carried around the Bering Sea by ocean currents, and so as they're resting, they'll be moved to new feeding grounds, and then they can dive. Well, the entire Bering Sea is a pretty relatively shallow body of water, and so they're well adapted to diving to the bottom of that water and searching for food. So in the winter, the walruses that were at Round Island will be further north in the Bering Sea, but they'll still have good access to feeding grounds there. And yeah, they seem to make it through fine. Next question.
I can't even read them. I'm getting too old.
Will the walrus travel as a herd, pod, or pack when they return to the ice?
I think so.
Yeah, well, they definitely are gregarious animals. They haul out in huge groups. Especially recently, we're seeing them up north, like Point Lay, Alaska. There have been photographs of 30,000 walrus in a group.
35.
I mean,
maybe even more.
Yeah, I don't think they're traveling in groups of thousands or anything, but they do definitely travel in pods of 10s, 20s, maybe even as much as 100. But
yeah,
I've heard stories of from the guys in the fishing boats where they've seen what they called like hundreds of them, passing by. But they're generally, I mean, you can watch them when they come ashore at the island. They're coming in singles and groups of 10s and 5s, and
Yeah.
but they'll stream in kind of all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a big group come in the other day.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
They like to be around one another, I'd say.
Let's see. Number 8. When will the females and males meet, and do the young ones that are a year or two old come along? Well, yes, the young ones that are a year or two old will be with the females, and they meet, I guess, depending on when the ice comes down, and they say that's late November to December.
Well, it depends. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it really depends on the.
starts forming, I think, in beginning of October or somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Way up there, but then later you get into the winter, the further south it comes, and it depends how cold it is and how far south the ice comes. Some years it comes all the way down into Bristol Bay, and other years it doesn't quite get down that far. It's, you know, out there by Cape Newenham, kind of the western coast, St. Lawrence Island.
We'll have to ask Charlie if we can put a camera on an ice pack.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
And in terms of 1 or 2 year old young, walruses are known to have really intense maternal care of their young. The young stay with the mother for usually a year or 2 years, and that's unique among marine mammals. So, and the mothers are extremely protective of those calves as well.
So the next question is, do walrus with broken tusks lose status when it comes to prime space on Round Island?
I was just reading a little bit about this the other day. I think they did do a little bit of study with, I think it was Miller back in the 70s out there around Island. And I don't know if it's status as much as in the place that they're at, but they lose. Well, I think they came to the conclusion that they lost a little bit of their ability to jab or joust as much, and therefore they were less capable of defending, you know, some of their space.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some with a broken tusk, they're able to sleep in a way that if they had a tusk, they wouldn't have been able to get in that position. So they're pretty creative with using rocks as pillows and themselves as pillows.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. It'd be interesting to read that article. Maybe we could post that report.
Yeah. Next question. I saw 2 walruses in the water who seem to be sparring a little with their tusks. Do they ever hurt each other by accident? Are the tusks sharp? Yeah, well, they sure do a lot of sparring. It's pretty neat to get to see that on the webcam. I'd say, in general, most of the activity going on at Round Island is, I don't know if you'd call it play or kind of practice.
Yeah, it's like a prelude to the mating season where they, according to Bud Fay, they really can attack each other when they're courting the females. And I guess in the mate they can break tusks like when they're mating. I've never seen them on Round Island breaking tusks just by jabbing each other. But
But they do end up, I mean, you see them on the island there with sores, and whether that's from being jabbed or parasites or you know, falling against a rock or something like that. It's kind of unknown, but I think they probably do get little jab wounds there periodically.
Yeah. But if you're looking at a tusk, the tip of it isn't a super sharp point. They live in too rough of an environment to have that be sharp. So the damaging aspect of it, I think, just comes from the force they're able to put behind those blows. And they're 3,000-pound animals. They can really put a lot of force behind that tusk.
there's a great video on YouTube where a polar bear attacks a herd, and one walrus jabs the polar bear one time, and just the blunt impact must have done some internal damage, but the polar bear slowly dies. So
Yeah.
that's a win for the walrus. But I guess it's not good to kill polar bears.
Somebody should tell the
But,
walrus
nature.
that.
Nature.
Yeah.
Can you describe and explain the various sounds walrus make?
Oh,
That's,
wow.
that means please move over. Or,
The answer to that question is no.
no. Again, we have that video of
Yeah.
E.T., the walrus from the
Point Defiance.
Point Defiance Zoo,
Yeah.
and he's in that video really shows you how intelligent these animals are. He can make the various noises on command, and
Yeah, they have really varied vocalizations and really interesting. There's all the kind of harsh bellowing and grunting that they do, and then there's also, I'm sure a lot of people who watched the camera saw the really musical chiming. They have really
Underwater clicks and
Yeah.
clacking.
teeth
type
clacking.
the steam whistle they can
Yeah.
really.
They're able to whistle just like a person.
So
Yeah.
there's a recording on our website too of underwater recording of sounds that they make.
Yeah. That was Diane's hydrophone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll
that's-
check that out.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of those sounds are ways of communicating with one another, but I also say it's most of the time it's a bit hard to tell what, whether there's a certain meaning attached to each sound. A lot of it to me, I guess, sounds like expressing discomfort, but that just might be the way it sounds to a person. Yeah. Next one, do walruses forage together as a group, or do they go their separate ways while looking for food?
We looked that up in the Bud Fay, kind of the Bible of walrus biology, and they do. They've been seen foraging as a group. They've also been seen going as individuals. But yeah, and then also this one study showed them all diving at the same time and then coming up at the same time. But I'm sure there's variations on that as well. I feel bad for those clams.
Yeah. Next one. We saw times when it appeared that rock falls were enough to cause a group to startle and head off the island. Were there any major disturbances that you witnessed out there this summer?
Not this summer, but one of the major disturbances we saw, there's a small plane was flying really low, and the noise of that plane spooked, what was it, 1,200? The whole main beach cleared off, and that was the biggest disturbance I think we've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, historically we've gotten disturbances from a number of different sources. They can come from natural sources like a rock tumbling down the bluff or a raven calling next to them.
We've seen
Or
foxes.
somebody rolls over and spooks the next guy, and they all get up. I don't think we saw anything, while we did have some disturbances caught on the video out there this year. I don't think any of them captured anything in particular that determined what the cause was. A lot of that noise that sounds like a rock fall or tumbling and that is actually other walrus that are off screen from the video that are getting up and moving across the rock beach there. So you really have to have a wide angle view of the whole scene there, or actually be there in order to determine what may have caused them to get up and move like that. But we do historically have a number of different sources, be that man-made by boats or planes that are passing by or through, or natural stuff from thunderstorms, ravens, rock falls.
We saw a couple of foxes spook some this summer.
Yeah.
And the Alaska Sealife Center has they're doing a study on First Beach where they have a sound meter and a camera looking out to sea and a camera looking at the walrus. So they're trying to see if there's any, if they can capture a specific sound and time that to point that to a specific disturbance. So that should be interesting data to review.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are currently working on that. They started that in 2012, I think. So they've got several years worth of data to review, and it'll probably be a year or two at least before we get the results of that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. This might be good for you, Ed. Do archaeological groups ever come to the island to reopen or expand past digs? And if so, have they found anything extraordinary?
Well, I mean, they do. Probably the most extraordinary thing they found thus far is that dates back to, I want to say 5,800 years or thereabouts, almost 6,000 years back from current time, which makes it one of the oldest sites in the region there. They're in the process of doing a report on that. That's all based on some archaeological digs that they did out there between 2006 and 2008. That was connected with moving some outhouses that we have there on the island. So we have people come out and clear an area if we're going to be digging in the ground. Otherwise, we don't do any digging. But there haven't been any major archaeological digs other than that. They've mostly been archaeological surveys, of the surface features and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, how many parties camp on the island each summer, and what's the weather calendar window for visiting? Let's see, visitors are welcome.
Yeah.
Come
Come visit.
We're open May 1 to August 15th generally. It depends. In the spring, it generally depends on when the bay gets ice-free and we can get out there. But generally, it's around May 1st. Sometimes it's a week later, or sometimes it's a week earlier. And we try to be there up until August 15th, depending on funding. Weather-wise, it's probably the nicest in May and June and the first part of July.
Yeah.
After mid-July, it starts getting a little snotty. You generally have more rain and squalls and storms moving through.
Although this August was gorgeous.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
unacceptable.
Again, that's generalities. I mean, each year is a little bit different. But,
Yeah.
And then we get campers, and we also get commercial fishermen coming out to do day visits. And I know last year the price of herring was down, so we didn't have many herring fishermen come out. But this year we had 6. I guess that wasn't that many as well.
yeah, your visits can depend on what you want to see while you're there too. Generally, the island's browner and not greened up early on. As you get into mid-May, it starts greening up more. Birds start nesting first part of May or thereabouts, and into mid-May, and maybe even the end of May in some of the colder years. And then the chicks are generally hatching out in mid to late June, so and foxes usually come out of the dens with their kits first part of July to mid-July. And then you got the walrus, which, depending on the year, they usually ramp up their numbers into June and July and then start tapering off into August. But the sea lions and the whales and stuff are all there generally earlier, like in April and May, first part of June. So kind of depends what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And do while you're there.
And there's a bunch of information for people who are interested in visiting that's available on the Fish and Game website. And we can post a link to that too. So next one.
That kind of answers the next question as well.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on then. Are there maps available of the local haulouts in the area?
Yes, I posted one. I posted that map on the website, on the chat page, and I will post it again.
Yeah. Next question: do walruses have predators?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, according to that Bud Fay study that we keep talking about, I guess natural predation is not a very major source of death for walruses, but they are preyed upon sometimes by polar bears, by killer whales, and I think also occasionally by great white sharks, which don't overlap with walruses' range very much, but they do come up toward the Aleutians and maybe southern Bering Sea once in a while. So.
And
Yeah.
humans. There's a hunt on Round Island from the locals in Togiak and Twin Hills and other
Well, there's
elsewhere in Bristol.
nine villages that are part of the
and then,
cooperative subsistence hunt out there.
and also up in St. Lawrence
But
Island.
then, all along the northwest
Yeah.
coast of Alaska and Siberia and Russia, they all have there's subsistence hunting there.
And killer whales are in the dolphin family. They're Delphinidae. Just get that out there. Okay. Is there still demand on walrus ivory? Which are all walruses in danger? I think they're listed as stable.
Well, they're up for consideration currently, and there's a ruling on their endangerment status expected in 2017, I think.
That's when they're supposed to. They're currently listed. The status is, I forget what they call that when they're listed to be listed, or
Yeah.
they're under consideration basically.
Being reviewed, and that's by Fish and Wildlife Service.
Right, the Fish and Wildlife Service does that, so they'll do an analysis and supposed to have a finding sometime in 2017.
Yeah.
And then all the ivory we collect, we give to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they register each piece of ivory, and then they give it to the Alaska Walrus Commission. And there's a annual auction in Dillingham, Alaska, in March, where the local craftsmen can purchase that and then start carving, and then they are able to sell those pieces.
So there is still a trade in ivory, both from native found or taken during subsistence hunt and stuff. All of that gets registered with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then the stuff that we specifically collect out at the island there in order to, which we do for a couple of reasons. One is to discourage people from going out there to collect it, but all of that comes back to the state and the federal government seals it, and then it's auctioned off to native carvers for carving, and then that money comes back to Pacific Walrus Conservation Fund, which then funds projects either on Round Island or elsewhere in the state.
All right. What can we do to help protect the walrus?
Don't poach.
Have good viewing habits. I mean, there's guidelines and stuff for viewing them, so you don't want to be disturbing them, especially when they're on their haul outs and stuff.
And like on the island, they're also very sensitive to smell, so we recommend people like keep a low profile, don't make loud noises, but also don't smoke cigarettes or even have like heavy perfumes.
And that's for if you're in the area of walruses, I guess. I guess as a general thing, it seems really helpful for this webcam on explore.org to have such good viewing, and just for people to be interested in walruses and asking questions and learning about them and paying attention to what's going on with their conservation, with the endangered species listing that's coming up that we just mentioned, and
just be involved.
Spread awareness, but yeah, bigger picture.
Yeah. Next one. What research techniques do you use to study the ecology and physiology of these marine mammals? Are all your techniques non-invasive, or do you implement invasive research for genetic purposes and such?
All of ours are non-invasive at the moment. Historically, I mean, there have been some invasive, I guess what you might term invasive, they're taken either from tagging or genetic studies where they take a current methodology is using like a little crossbow, and it takes a very small plug out of the outside hide, and then they use that for genetic testing. So there are some invasive methods that are being used around the state, I guess, but nothing currently out at the sanctuary.
We've been collecting scat
for genetic analysis. We do that. Mostly all of our stuff is observation based.
Do you anticipate being back next season? Yes?
Yeah, thanks to funding from
Host
Explore and several other sources.
Yeah. And don't know exactly when yet. At the very least, it'll be around May 1st, possibly as early as mid-April. Maybe doing some sea lion work in that last part of April, but we'll definitely be back next year.
Yeah, and the webcam should be back as well. About how many fox dens are on the island? Has this isolated fox population been safe from disease such as rabies? Well, we think there's maybe 5 or 6 den sites on the island. Not all of them are currently active, but there have been at least 2 active dens in the past 3 years. One down by where the sea lions haul out, and then one really close behind the cabin that Ryan and I have been staying in. And that's quite a few foxes for an island of Round Island size. I think because there's typically a lot of food available to them, and they don't have much predation there. They're able to have really high population density. They're relatively isolated because Round Island is 10 miles offshore, but then in cold winters, sometimes there's solid sea ice that animals can come and go from the mainland. So I don't think anyone's looked into like how recently the foxes came over, or if there's very much genetic difference that's arisen, but definitely no knowledge of rabies or anything like that on Round Island, thankfully for us and the other people who are out there.
Yeah, I think last time there was any real study done on the foxes was back in the 70s, and that was really prior to this proliferation of genetic research that's being done these days. So I don't think there's any real knowledge base on how long they've been there, or if they're truly a separate population, or how much or how often new animals come or go. But we don't test them for rabies or any diseases, but we've never observed any animals that appeared to have that problem. And aside from that, I think they've probably got some lice issues or or other parasite type things, because they periodically look pretty mangy, but depending on the year.
Yeah. The little ones are really cute though.
All right. The next question is, where do the puffins go in the winter? That's a great question. They're actually, once they're done, once they raise their chicks, they spend the entire winter out to sea, and it's amazing that that little bird can put up with the cold and the wind and be able to eat. And they only come back to land to have their chicks. So yeah, they spend the full winter out to sea, which is pretty amazing. We have tufted and horned puffins out there, and it was really neat to watch the Atlantic puffins on the in Maine on the otherexplore.org website. Out on Seal Island. We unfortunately never get to see the chicks because they're in their burrows in the cliffs and far too dangerous. But
yeah, and then they don't fledge until after we leave the island.
And you had met a girl whose job was to go climb down and
reach in the puffin burrows and capture the chicks down in the Aleutians, I guess. But we don't do that on Round Island. So Ryan thought he got a look at a puffin chick just before we left, though, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was in the mouth of a raven.
Yeah, quite a bit of predation happening all the time there on the seabirds and their chicks. Yeah.
What is a group of ravens called? I think that's called a murder, which is pretty apt. Those guys are...
Murder of crows, right?
Murder of crows.
Oh,
I'm not sure if the ravens are murdered or not.
Yeah, well, looks like we're winding down here, but anything else that we want to cover?
Thanks for watching. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to Explore for setting us up, and come back next year. Come out and visit.
Yeah.
Even better.
There'll be a prize for the first viewer to come and camp. That will be, we'll carry your bags for you.
Yeah.
You're not going to bake cookies or something?
Yes, we love, if you could bring us cookies, that would be great. Or what was?
I thought you were going to bake them cookies. Bake cookies.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for all the questions and the interest this summer. It's been a lot of fun doing that, so look forward to more of it.
Stay tuned. Maybe after we get our final report out and stuff, we'll do an update with a blog or something on the website there. Maybe do another chat or something to go over that. We'll have to wait and see how things go, where everybody's at in the off season.
Oh, and we can't forget to thank the HD on Tap crew. Those guys did all the work setting up the cameras and the fuels and the power stations, and Tim and Andrew and Special Forces if you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right.
All right, we're signing off here. Thanks for tuning in.